Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city. Perhaps the next story about betrayal will be from your city, and we start. A small truck with a shabby cab crawled leisurely along a damp country highway, climbing a gentle hill, with Noah behind the wheel, occasionally glancing at the rearview mirror to make sure the trailer with their few belongings was still in place. Emma sat nearby, clutching a thermos of hot coffee. She was checking for the second time in an hour that the lid was securely screwed on. Her thoughts wandered between the past, which remained hundreds of kilometers behind in the United States, and the future that now opened before them in a small town in northern British Columbia. Through the side window, one could see dense pine forests surrounding the road on both sides. The grayish sky hung over the tops of the pines and spruces, and the light rain gently tapped on the windshield. "Do you think we'll really fit in here?" Emma asked quietly, taking a sip of her coffee and looking at Noah. Her voice sounded slightly tense, although she tried to give him confidence. "If we don't try, we'll never know," he replied, trying to sound cheerful. Noah downshifted, feeling the truck shudder as it made another slight incline. "It seems to me that here we can start with a clean slate." Emma nodded and ran her hand along the edge of the seat. She remembered how a few months ago they were seriously discussing whether it was worth changing their lives so radically, leaving the States, leaving behind a familiar way of life, and moving to Canada. But it was here, in this area remote from large cities, that Noah found work as a survival instructor and planned to collaborate with a local tourist center. For him, it was almost a dream: quiet nature, mountains, forests, and people who needed advice from someone who had personally experienced all the hardships of the most dangerous profession, a firefighter. He loved the idea of being able to teach hikers, hunters, and outdoor enthusiasts how to properly prepare for challenging conditions. And yet, from his former service, from a terrible fire in one of the cities of Nebraska, where his best friend died, a feeling of pain and guilt remained in Noah's memory. That fire changed his life. Along with the burnt walls and collapsed ceilings, it was as if a part of his heart had burned out. It was then that he received a serious injury, a dislocated shoulder, and a burn to his leg, which is why he was forced to leave the service. Emma also had to go through her own personal grief, the loss of a child. This happened in a previous marriage, which ended without bringing her any other happiness. Now she tried not to return to those memories. She was afraid to open old wounds again. She worked as a nurse and hoped that in a new place, where nothing would remind her of that loss, she would be able to focus on helping people and, most importantly, on her own mental rehabilitation. As they passed the sign with the name of the town, the rain subsided slightly and the sky cleared for a moment, revealing lightened clouds above the tops of the coniferous trees. The town consisted of several streets located around a central road, on which there were shops, a couple of cafes, a post office, and a municipal building with a small park in front of it. The houses were modest, most often 1 or 2 stories high, with spacious courtyards, and well-tended flower beds filled with autumn flowers could be seen everywhere. Noah checked the directions to the new house written down on a piece of paper. Workers were waiting for them there, having already delivered some of the building materials and the assembled frame, because the house was partially built, but still required significant finishing touches. It was something like a do-it-yourself project. They had bought a small plot of land with unfinished housing in advance, and now planned to invest their efforts, funds, and, of course, hopes into it. "I'm sure we can finish everything before the first serious snows," Noah said, turning onto the side path leading to that very site. The driveway was narrow, although well-rolled, with small pebbles scattered along the edges. The surface was slightly muddy from the rain, and the truck skidded before it found traction. Emma looked forward. The rectangular silhouette of a wooden house without final exterior decoration appeared through the trees. The roof was covered with a metal profile, and the walls were partially covered with protective sheets. The place seemed secluded, but not too wild. There was no feeling that they had climbed to the edge of the world. To the left was a small stream flowing a little lower down the slope. To the right, about 100 meters away, a tall forest began. The site as a whole looked as if harmony with nature was already hidden in it, and all that remained was to decorate everything a little with human touches. "Yes, I hope everything works out," Emma finally said, emerging from her thoughts about the past. She knew that the move had become something of an internal symbol of a second chance for both of them. They needed time to rediscover their faith in themselves, in each other, and that there could be happiness ahead of them. When they stepped out of the truck, they were greeted by cool air and the smell of damp pine trees. Somewhere in the distance you could hear the chirping of birds, clearly happy that the rain had stopped. Emma adjusted the collar of her windbreaker, looked around and noticed two workers checking tools on the wooden deck of the porch. One, taller, held a level in his hands, and the other carefully put hammers and saws in a box. Seeing Noah and Emma, the men nodded at them friendly. "Good morning," Noah greeted, coming closer. "Thank you for arriving before us and already starting work. How are things on site?" "Yes, it seems normal," answered the tall worker with a typical Canadian accent. "Yesterday, we had to double-check something in the foundation, but so far everything is going according to plan. You must be Noah and Emma. Very nice. My name is Owen, and this is my partner Justin." Emma smiled and said hello, taking some paper from Owen's hands with a list of materials and current tasks. Justin, a guy who looked to be about 30, with a friendly expression on his face, adjusted his cap and said, "We will need a few days to finish the walls and window in the bedroom. In addition, it is necessary to check the drainage system and insulate part of the ceiling. We hope you don't mind the noise. There will be a lot of sawing and banging around here." "Believe me, after my previous job, I'm used to any noise," Noah grinned. "As for warmth and protection from precipitation, this is the main thing, because winter in these parts can be harsh, right?" "Oh yes, it can suddenly snow and rain here for several days in a row," Owen confirmed, looking around the sky. "But I think we'll be lucky. In the next week, the forecast promises only light rains, and therefore we will have time to finish everything." While the men were inspecting the construction site, Emma decided to explore the yard. The small lawn in front of the house was overgrown with grass, with wildflowers popping up in some places. Emma bent down and picked a couple of small yellow dandelion heads, although they were already slightly withered by the autumn wind. "They're still cute," she thought, "even though they show signs of the end of summer." In truth, Emma had always enjoyed tending the flower garden and hanging potted plants on the porch. In the previous house where she once lived, she had a beautiful garden, but with the departure of her husband, everything faded, and at the same time her own joy from being at home faded away. Now she wanted to regain this simple feminine pleasure growing flowers, watering them in the morning, feeling the aroma of greenery soaked in dew. She remembered a conversation with her close friend back in the USA when she with cautious joy congratulated Emma on her decision to move. "At least there you will be a little distracted from everything that happened. You will start a new life. It's like putting a period and starting the next sentence." Emma herself then replied that yes, perhaps it would be so, although her heart sank with fear of the unknown. But now, walking through this rain-damp yard, she felt a quiet confidence flare up inside her. Maybe here, far from the usual noise of the big city and from the memories of unhealed wounds, everything would really turn out differently. By evening, when the workers had already left, Noah and Emma were left alone. They brought into the house several boxes with things and what they would need for the first days. Bed linen, dishes, warm blankets, and rubber boots. There would be nowhere in the forest without them. The frame walls of the house still looked unfinished. Mineral wool was visible in some places, and wires were sticking out here and there, but the room already allowed for a mattress and several chairs. Moreover, for now they were going to spend the night in a small mobile trailer house, which they are renting on a neighboring plot until the main housing is finally ready for occupancy. "I'm so tired from the road," Emma said, sitting down on an improvised bench in the form of an old board placed on two strong boxes, "and my head is buzzing with new information." Noah sat down next to him, wrapping his arms around his knees. He, too, was exhausted, long hours behind the wheel, And then a meeting with workers and resolving thousands of small issues took their toll. But despite his fatigue, he felt something like anticipation inside him. It's okay, today we'll spend the night in the trailer, resting, and tomorrow morning we'll start all these household chores. We need to buy groceries, stop by the hardware store, and at the same time, let's look at the clinic where you will work, he suggested, lightly touching her shoulder. I would like to know immediately when I can begin my duties. Otherwise, I don't like sitting idly by maybe the staff there isn't very big. What if they need someone to replace them? And Emma stopped short and quietly added, sometimes I feel uncomfortable being alone with my thoughts for a long time. She rarely talked about the fact that she was occasionally visited by disturbing memories and experiences. Employment in medicine, helping others, this was not only a source of income for her, but also a kind of therapy. When she plunged into work, her own tragedies and fears were temporarily forgotten. Noah understood this and always tried to support. Okay, we'll go tomorrow, he said, and after a pause added, as for thoughts, I'm nearby. If you want to talk or just be quiet, I understand that. In response, she only looked gratefully into his eyes. So they sat in the still half-abandoned house, on a plank in the company of the first twilight, which peered through the cracks in the paneling. Outside, the trees rustled faintly, and somewhere in the distance a bird of prey screamed, as if announcing that night was approaching. A new morning arrived, quiet and cool. The rain had stopped, and slow, vague clouds floated in the sky. A temporary trailer, rented for a couple of weeks from a good-natured neighbor, an elderly Canadian named Martin, stood a little to the side, under low-hanging spruce branches. Martin also lived nearby. He had a larger house and a plot of land with his own garden. Without any further questions, he agreed to help the American couple when he heard their story of moving and learned that their house was not yet completed. Good morning, he greeted Noah when he came out in the morning to get some air. Aren't you cold at night? No, everything's fine, thank you, Noah replied, straightening his jacket and stretching. The air here is excellent. I slept like the dead. True, I woke up early to heat the coffee on the fire. Martin grinned and pointed to a small outbuilding nearby. I have an old stove there and a supply of firewood if you want to cook. And be careful that this little fire of yours doesn't flare up. Of course, it's damp now, but you always have to be careful in the forest. Noah nodded. He knew how important it was to stay safe, especially in wooded areas. Too many times had he seen a small spark grow into a huge flame. However, Martin apparently did not know about Noah's past, that he was a former firefighter who went through real hell. Noah was in no hurry to share this information, for now he was more comfortable maintaining an easy distance. Emma, meanwhile, had already tidied herself up and was sitting inside the trailer, pouring coffee, which they had previously bought in bags, into mugs. A simple instant drink cannot be compared with the aromatic coffee that she loved in the city, but at the moment even this bitter taste seemed almost familiar. We should write down what else we have to do today, she said, seeing Noah go inside. Look, here's the list. The first thing is to stop at the grocery store. Second, find out about the administrative formalities for a temporary residence permit. Third is the clinic. The fourth is a hardware store. Fifth, it might be worth checking out where the post office is, because we should be receiving some documents. It would also be a good idea to hire someone to help with the electrical work. Noah looked at his arm, which sometimes ached when he overused his previously injured shoulder. I can do some things myself, but I still need specialist advice. You think Owen and Justin can't handle it? They said they were not pros when it came to wiring, more like universal builders. We can ask them to recommend a local electrician, he said thoughtfully. In general, I like that we get involved in the work ourselves. This somehow makes it more meaningful. Probably, Emma agreed, but I'm afraid to pick up a saw or a hammer in case I do something wrong. It's okay, you'll learn, Noah winked at her. If I can teach people how to navigate in the wild, then we can handle basic construction. An hour later, they were already walking along the main street of the town. Everything here seemed so quiet and leisurely. The store where food was sold was also a place where one could buy stationery and household items. The sign above the door said, Rose's Supermarket. The inside smelled like a mixture of fresh bread, inexpensive spices, and cleaning products. Behind the counter stood a smiling middle-aged woman with short hair. "Good morning. Are you new to our town?" she asked when Noah and Emma approached the checkout with a basket, into which they had already managed to throw bread, a stick of butter, some fruit, and cereals. "Yes, we moved here from the USA," Emma nodded. "We live on the outskirts for now. We are finishing building a house." "Oh, that's wonderful. I'm Rose, and you?" "I'm Emma, and this is my husband Noah. Nice to meet you." "I'm glad too. I always have fresh baked goods here, so come in if you need something tasty or something small. And you know, if you need medicinal herbs, local products, I have all this available. I bring it from farmers and neighboring villages." Emma smiled and let her know that they would definitely be regular customers. Before leaving, they chatted more about the weather and the fact that rainy autumn is a common part of life here, and the first frosts could come by the end of October. The next step was a visit to the clinic. The building turned out to be quite modest, one story, with a small parking lot. At the entrance, they were greeted by a sign, "Get a flu shot," and a sign with doctor's appointment schedules. It turned out to be clean inside, but cozy in a rustic way. There was no crowd here, like in city clinics. A young girl sat behind the reception desk, engrossed in her computer. "Good afternoon, how can I help?" she asked, looking up from the monitor. "Hello, we are looking for a head physician or someone from the management. I'm Emma, a nurse. We moved here recently." "I was told there are vacancies here," Emma began. The girl perked up. "Oh yes, our administrator, Mrs. Harper, was just mentioning that a new nurse was coming. She's in her office now. I can show you in. And you," she turned to Noah, "do you want to wait here or will you go alone?" "I guess I'll wait. I want to look around more," he answered, sitting down on a chair standing by the window. Emma followed the girl into the depths of the corridor. Soon she found herself in an office where a woman of about 50 with pleasant features and lively eyes was sitting at the table. She immediately stood up when Emma entered. "Good afternoon, I'm Mary Harper, the clinic administrator. You must be Emma. I'm very glad to meet you. Have a seat." They shook hands, and Emma briefly talked about her work experience. 5 years as a nurse in a hospital, then in a private clinic, and she had the opportunity to work with seriously ill patients and provide emergency care. Mrs. Harper listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, and then nodded, making notes in her folder. "Great," she said when Emma finished the story. "We are really looking for a nurse, especially one who understands emergency care. Our town may be small, but we have a lot of tourists and hunters. Various injuries happen, and the nearest large hospital is several hours away. Of course, there is an ambulance, but it doesn't always arrive quickly, so any qualified support on site is valuable." Emma felt a pleasant excitement. She suddenly had the feeling that here she could be truly useful, and not like in a giant machine in a big city, but by directly interacting with people. "You can start tomorrow, but I understand that you are just settling in," said Mrs. Harper. "I'm ready to start as soon as possible," Emma answered enthusiastically. "We just need to get some documents in order, but I don't think it will take much time." "Wonderful. I'll see how to arrange everything quickly and contact you. Maybe work half a day at a time while you're in the process of moving. And then, when you settle in, you can fully enter the schedule." Emma nodded, feeling a quiet joy spreading inside her, as if the gloomy sky above her head had brightened for a moment. They discussed several more organizational issues: schedule, medical insurance, possible shifts. Having concluded a short conversation, Emma went out to Noah, who was waiting for her. "Well, how?" he asked, rising to meet her. "Everything seems to be fine. They're taking me," she said joyfully. "They'll call soon about the final documents." "That's great," Noah smiled. He was pleased to see a spark of life flashing in her eyes. They said goodbye to the staff and went to the hardware store, where there was a great variety of tools that Noah could fill a cart full of if he wanted. However, he understood that for now only the basics were needed: a shovel, a pair of strong hammers, a hacksaw, boxes of nails and screws. Emma, meanwhile, found a set of wall hooks and a small solar-powered light in the home department. It seemed to her that this lamp would be useful to them on the site because it was completely dark there at night. Then they also looked at the local post office to inquire about their letters and packages. It turned out that the postman, also an elderly man, had already heard about the new family from the USA and was curious whether they were really going to live here permanently. Noah readily confirmed that this was not a temporary solution, and the old man smiled, saying, "Then it's time to get a PO box. Everything is very simple here. I will send your letters to you, and you can pick them up at any convenient time." As they walked back to the car, laden with shopping, they felt their legs tingling slightly and their stomachs growling from hunger. "It would be nice to find some cafe," Emma suggested, covering her eyes with her hand from the suddenly appearing sun. "Yes, I think I saw one on the main street," Noah recalled. "I think it was called By the Stream." "Let's go there. I don't have the strength anymore." The cafe really turned out to be nice, with a small terrace overlooking that very narrow stream murmuring behind a wooden fence. Inside, everything was simple: wooden tables, a few paintings on the walls with landscapes of the surrounding mountains. Behind the counter stood a woman, about 40 years old, with long brown hair tied in a ponytail and a bright scarf. "Welcome," she smiled as Noah and Emma sat down at the table. "My name is Belinda. What will you order?" Noah first asked if they had the soup of the day or something hot. "Yes, we have seafood soup with vegetables and also homemade chicken pie." Emma chose soup and Noah chose pie, not forgetting a mug of strong tea. While Belinda was writing down the order, another local came into the cafe and quietly said hello. Emma noticed that everyone seemed calm and friendly, the feeling of a small community where everyone knew each other. She even liked it. Here, everything was somehow more humane than in big cities. Lunch at By the Stream was tasty and satisfying. When Belinda brought the bill, Emma asked how many people they usually had. The hostess replied that during the tourist season it is busier, but now, closer to autumn, the number of guests is decreasing, so the cafe mainly lives at the expense of the locals. After lunch, Noah and Emma returned to the site. Owen and Justin were waiting for them there, having already completed some of the work in the morning. The frame of the walls in the living room looked stronger, and the first floor window now had new glass. "As you can see, we didn't waste any time," Owen said when Noah greeted him. "We plan to finish the interior lining of the living room by tomorrow. Only you still have to wait in the bedroom. They didn't have time to bring the material." "It's okay, we still have somewhere to spend the night," Noah answered calmly, examining the results. "What about the electrics?" Owen shrugged. "We called our friend an electrician. His name is Sam. He may come one of these days, but right now he is busy at another site. Presumably, it will be free by the weekend." "Okay, we'll wait." Emma, hearing the conversation, came over and asked Owen to show where they planned to run the wires for the future kitchen. She wanted to make sure she had a convenient outlet for the coffee machine and a couple more for other appliances. The man showed the diagrams and explained that Sam would adjust the location of the outlets to meet the standards. In the turmoil of work, the second day of their life in a new place gradually began to come to an end. The light began to set, and the forest around the house was filled with a soft, rustling sound. Foggy streaks lay over the stream, and the sky was painted in muted pinkish and purple hues. Owen and Justin said goodbye after packing up the instrument. Martin, a neighbor, came by to see if we needed anything and brought a blanket and a bag of potatoes from his garden. "I'll leave it on the porch," he said when he found Emma cleaning up boards around the construction site. "Whether you bake or boil, your potatoes are good. Well, if you need anything, knock." "Thank you, Martin. You are so kind," Emma smiled, feeling that she was becoming more and more attached to this quiet place and its sympathetic inhabitants. By the time she and Noah were alone again, darkness had already enveloped the area. They decided to walk to the trailer, leaving the car at the house. The road was illuminated only by the faint light of a small flashlight that Noah took from the store. Their steps rustled through wet fallen needles and leaves. "You know," Noah said quietly, "I feel like we took the right step." For the first time in a long time, I had the feeling that I was not running from the past, but was moving towards something new. Emma, walking next to him, squeezed his hand. "I have similar feelings. I didn't even expect to accept this place so quickly. It's somehow calm here or something. It feels like there is a lot of goodness around, and no one bothers to ask questions about what brought us here." Although some have already asked, Noah grinned, remembering the postman and saleswoman Rose. But they do it somehow kindly, without intrusive curiosity. For some time they walked in silence, listening to the night sounds of the forest. An owl hooted somewhere, and a small animal rustled in the bushes, probably. A light breeze touched their faces, cool and clean. Emma's heart sank with quiet gratitude that now, on this night, she could feel hope next to her. Life will not return the loss of her past, will not erase the terrible moments from her memory. But perhaps it will give you a chance to move on and maybe come to something wonderful. By the time they got to the trailer, they were both pretty cold and tired. Noah turned on the small gas heater inside that Martin had kindly lent to them. Emma, having changed into warm pajamas, sat down at the table, took out her diary, and began to write down her thoughts about the past day, who she met, what she bought, what things she managed to do. It was her way of organizing her life and not letting her worries take over. "What are you writing there?" Noah asked, pouring hot water for tea into a camp mug. "You know, usually I only write down the main events, but today I want to write down everything, even what we saw in the cafe, what Rose said, what color the sunset was. I want to remember these first days." Noah placed the mug in front of her and leaned down to touch her temple with his lips. "Great idea. Someday we will leaf through these records and remember how it all began." Emma closed the diary and looked at it. "We have begun this chapter, and although it is far from over, I already feel that it is important." "I agree," Noah nodded. "Our home, our new life." They sat in a cramped trailer, lit only by a weak lamplight in the twilight silence of the forest, and all fuss receded into the background. They were surrounded by the coolness of the Canadian night, but inside they suddenly felt warm with the knowledge that there was a lot ahead that they still had to achieve. On the threshold of this journey, they still carried their scars and memories, but every new moment, every acquaintance, every step along the damp path strengthened their resolve. They could truly begin again. Outside the window, the autumn rain was drizzling lightly, the very last drops that seemed to be testing themselves on the eve of the upcoming Canadian winter. The sky remained cloudy, but not gloomy. Some special softness of November weather could be discerned in it. Inside the unfinished house, Noah and Emma sat on the floor of the future living room, spreading a blanket on the boards and placing plastic plates on it. Their celebratory table on the occasion of their wedding anniversary looked quite modest. Fruit, cookies, hot tea in a thermos, sandwiches, but most importantly, they were together, and for almost a year they shared not only shelter, but also worries, joys, and memories. The workers temporarily stopped noisy work to leave the couple alone. Owen and Justin left to get materials, promising to return later in the evening. And Martin, a neighbor, knowing about the important date, left a fresh bouquet of wildflowers from his greenhouse at the door. In appearance, they were simple small white and purple petals collected in a lush bouquet, but they smelled so pleasant that Emma could not resist bringing them to her face several times, inhaling the aroma. "I can't believe it's already been a year," she said, tearing off a piece of the cookie and popping it in her mouth. There was quiet excitement in the eyes. "Yes," Noah nodded, stroking her hand. "So much has happened, and we could not even imagine that we would celebrate our first family anniversary here in British Columbia on the floor of an unfinished house." He smiled, but under this smile there was a slight nervousness. After all, he already had a secret plan, a gift that Emma did not yet know about. Noah spent several weeks looking for the right golden retriever puppy, feeling that this would not be just a pet for a home, but a real new beginning, filling their still fragile family nest with warmth. Moreover, Noah himself knew how important the image of a child in their life was for Emma. They both had long felt that they would like to raise someone together, but fear, sad memories of the loss of Emma, and the severity of Noah's past did not allow them to decide on big changes. However, a puppy is different. Noah was sure their common little tailed friend could become that very ray of light that would fill the house with joy. And even if for some people a dog is just a dog, for him and Emma, it will become a real member of the family. I know that our life here is not yet settled, Noah said, filling a mug with tea and handing it to Emma. But I would like to surprise you today. I hope it will be pleasant. Surprise? She asked, raising her eyebrows in surprise. You've already prepared an engraved ring for me. Emma touched her finger, where a new thin engagement ring sparkled in addition to the old one, with their initials. Isn't this enough? That's not all, Noah said slightly mysteriously. But to find out what I'm up to, we'll have to get to one place. Emma looked at him questioningly, but did not press for details. She saw a mixture of excitement and joy in her husband's eyes, and decided not to ruin the moment with questions. And she herself was one of those people who sincerely loves surprises, especially if she feels that there is a real warm intention behind them. After eating sandwiches and drinking the rest of the tea, they carefully put away the blanket and dishes, locked the house, and got into the car. The rain had almost stopped by that time, only rare drops flickered on the glass. Are we going far? Emma asked as Noah pulled out of the driveway and onto the town's main street. No, not too much. Within half an hour, if we don't get off the road. Noah tried to speak in a casual tone, although his heart was beating a little stronger than usual. 10 minutes later, they turned towards the neighboring village. The surrounding landscape gave way to low hills and fields, already dusted with light frost in some places. Emma liked this time of year. Nature, preparing for snowy hibernation, acquired a special piercing beauty. Approaching a low house with a red roof and a colorful fence, Noah slowed down. In the yard one could see a large enclosure with several golden puppies running around it. Noah, what are we doing here? Emma asked, starting to guess, but still not quite daring to believe. Now you'll find out, he answered mysteriously and stopped the car. A woman with a smiling face came out into the yard and waved her hand, inviting her to come in. Noah looked at Emma and, seeing that a spark of hope was already flashing in her eyes, said, "Happy anniversary, my love. Let's go." Emma was not immediately able to get up. It was as if she was pressed to the seat by the fear of great joy. She was afraid to burst into tears right there, without having time to take a single step. But Noah carefully took her hand, helped her out of the car, and led her to the enclosure. "Hi, my name is Gloria," the woman introduced herself as they came closer. "I have your puppies safe and sound. Just try to choose one when they are all so wonderful." Emma stood silently, looking at the swarming fluffy balls. There were 5 of them, all of a luxurious golden color. When they saw people, they began to whine joyfully and reach for the net, wagging their short tails. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She pressed her palm to her lips, not hiding her emotions. "These are purebred retriever puppies," Gloria explained. "Documents, vaccinations, everything is there. I already talked to Noah. He said that he wants to take one of my kids for our wedding anniversary. What are your feelings? Are you ready to welcome them into your home and heart?" Emma couldn't immediately answer with words. She just nodded, brushing away her tears. Then she extended her hand through the net to the puppies, and one tiny boy with a whiter mask on his face nuzzled her fingers. The others were also friendly, but this particular little one was literally climbing to get to her hand. Emma laughed through her tears, and Noah, smiling, asked Gloria to open the enclosure. "I think he chose you," Noah said as Emma leaned toward the puppy. The little retriever was so clumsy that, taking 2 steps, he managed to get entangled in his own paws and fall funny. But when Emma took him in her arms, he became quiet, staring straight into her eyes, and then licked her nose a couple of times. "Hello, baby," Emma whispered, again unable to hold back her tears. "God, Noah, thank you." She pressed the puppy to her chest, feeling his warm body, feeling his little heart beating furiously. At that moment, Emma realized that the decision to move, build a house here, and try to start over was the right one, albeit difficult, albeit filled with anxiety, but right. "We need to come up with a name for him," Noah said, watching her. "Harper," she answered without thinking for a second. "Why Harper?" Gloria smiled, filling out the paperwork that confirmed the purchase of the puppy. Emma remained silent because the phrase was already on the tip of her tongue. "Because this is the name of Mrs. Harper from the clinic, a kind woman who made me feel needed here in the town." But that's not the only reason. Harper sounded light, as if embracing several meanings at once. It was similar to harbor and hope. She liked how the name fell on the ear and gave a warm feeling. It was also the name of her cousin's Canadian friend, who always spoke of peace and kindness. In a word, for Emma this name had many soft consonances, and most importantly, it seemed to be happy. "Harper," Noah said calmly, and the puppy, hearing the voice, wagged its tiny tail. A few more formalities, and the two of them returned to the car. Or rather, the three of them, with their little furry son. Emma sat in the back seat to hold him in her arms. Noah, starting the engine, looked in the mirror every now and then and grinned. Emma, without hiding her delight, ruffled Harper's ears, looked at his paws, at his pink tongue, at his bright eyes full of curiosity. "We'll have to buy everything we need: bowls, toys, bedding," Emma said. "And of course, take him to the veterinarian today for an examination." "I've already agreed. In the center of our town, there is a veterinary clinic. I think the doctor's name is Lisa Randall. She kindly agreed to host us in the evening," Noah said. "You thought of everything in advance." Emma laughed. "I tried." They returned to their site around noon. While Noah showed the workers the best place to insulate the gable and how they planned to install the electrical wiring for street lighting, Emma set up a temporary corner for Harper against the living room wall. Of course, it was still far from being completely finished, but several floorboards had already appeared, and there was enough space to lay a warm blanket. The puppy sniffed, explored every corner, poked its nose into toolboxes, and tried to chew the hammer handles sticking out of them. Emma pulled him away, laughing, stroking his soft belly. When it got dark, they went to the veterinarian's clinic. Dr. Randall was a pleasant woman of about 35, with cheerful reddish hair tied into a bun. She examined the puppy, weighed it, and made notes on the card. "Harper looks healthy and well cared for," she said as Emma held the baby in her lap. "The main thing is to give him the right food and don't overload him with walks while his joints are still developing. Retrievers are an active breed, but it is important for them to do everything gradually." Emma and Noah listened to the advice with almost childlike attention, and Harper didn't seem to worry. He was interested in sniffing the new office, and he also loved it when people stroked him behind the ear. "Come back for a re-examination in a couple of weeks," the veterinarian summed up. "If you suddenly notice something strange: runny nose, cough, indigestion, write or call immediately." "Definitely," Emma nodded, paying and taking her furry treasure back to the car. Thus, a new resident entered their family, which had gradually thawed on the soil of the Canadian province, enlivening everything around with his puppyish curiosity. The first night, Harper either whined or tried to get out into the street, then, on the contrary, he climbed into their bed with all his might. Morning walks turned into little adventures. Emma went with him to the stream, and the puppy dived into piles of autumn leaves and emerged covered in fluff and earth. She laughed, although sometimes she had to wash him up to his ears in the sink equipped in the trailer. "I didn't know it would be so fun," she admitted to Noah one evening. "It seems like there's more trouble, but at the same time, something wakes up inside me as if I'm learning to enjoy simple things again." "I'm glad you like Harper so much," Noah said, wearily taking off his work boots. "But I admit I'm delighted too." This afternoon he grabbed my glove and ran around the yard with it, and when I tried to take it, he brought it back as if it was the greatest value and was waiting for me to praise him. "Did you praise it?" "Certainly, he's great." Emma's eyes lit up. The two of them looked out the door and saw that the puppy was sleeping on a small bed with its paws under its face. There was a chill coming from the street, and approaching snow could already be felt in the night air. This family seen Noah, Emma, and Harper sleeping peacefully seemed the most touching for both. A month has passed. During this time, the house began to look much more comfortable. Owen and Justin completed all major exterior wall and roof work. Electrician Sam installed wiring throughout the rooms so that the light bulbs finally came on. Finishing work, kitchen installation, and some details on the interior layout still had to be done, but it was already possible to live there. And one evening in late November, Noah and Emma officially moved out of the trailer and into their own bedroom, albeit unfurnished for now, sleeping on a new mattress thrown directly onto the floor. Harper curiously examined each room, sniffed bags of cement that they no longer needed, boxes of tiles, played with tiles, or rather tried to chew cardboard, for which Noah gently scolded him, saying, "You can't," and Emma then brought the puppy rubber toys bought at the pet store. At the same time, another important event occurred. Emma was officially given a permanent schedule at the local clinic 3 full days a week and 1 day on duty. She plunged headlong into her work, helped the doctor at appointments, assisted in minor operations, gave recommendations to patients, and for the first time in a long time, she felt needed and, more importantly, protected from difficult thoughts. How life-giving it is to have something you love, she said to Noah when she returned home tired, but with a happy smile. "I understand you. I also like my new job," he nodded. And Noah has recently managed to recruit his first students. He taught courses on survival and safety in the mountains for tourists, helped the organizers of hikes and rafting groups. Sometimes I even went out with them for a couple of days, conducting practical classes on making a fire, setting up tents, and providing first aid. Thus life acquired a new rhythm. Morning breakfast with Emma, a walk with Harper, then work or household chores, in the evening again briefly run into Rose's store, look at the post office, sometimes drink tea at the By the Stream cafe. On weekends joint forays into the forest, arranging the house and watching old movies on the laptop because they haven't bought a TV yet. For the first time in many months, both of them stopped squeezing from pain inside. And yet, when Emma stroked Harper and watched him fall asleep, she sometimes felt a painful pang of memories of the child she had lost in her previous marriage. The thought, what if things were different, knocked on her consciousness, and her heart sank painfully. But now Noah was nearby, and there was a puppy, like a playful baby. This little furry friend distracted Emma from difficult thoughts, helping her, at least for a while, believe in the future. And so imperceptibly autumn turned into winter. The first snow fell in mid-December, a little earlier than usual, covering the forest and slopes with a white fluffy blanket. It had been snowing for the third day without a break, softly and slowly settling on the branches of coniferous trees. The forest was transformed and began to resemble a Christmas card. White snowdrifts that gave roundness to every hillock and boulder, as well as a ringing silence that seemed to envelop everything around. Noah and Emma's house was now warm and cozy. During this time, they managed to install a small but good quality fireplace in the living room, near which hung a rainbow rug, Harper's favorite place. The dog had already grown up by this point. That tiny puppy now looked more confident and tall, but still remained incredibly playful. Every morning he nuzzled Emma's hand, asking for a walk, and she, smiling, got out of bed and walked outside, putting on a warm jacket and boots. "Try not to forget your keys today, otherwise you'll have to knock on the door again." Noah teased her when one morning Emma rushed out into the street in a hurry and accidentally slammed the door, leaving a bunch of keys in the pocket of her other jacket. "Very funny," Emma muttered, although a smile played on her lips. "And anyway, who let me in then?" "You." They really began to allow themselves little playful squabbles, which are usually characteristic of married couples with a certain experience of living together. But just a few months ago, caution was still in the air in their relationship. "We are learning to be real spouses," Emma thought, throwing on a scarf and unfastening Harper's leash. The retriever quickly ran circles through the snowdrifts, jumping so that the snow flew in all directions, and Emma walked nearby, enjoying the view of the white expanses. freshly fallen powder snow crunched underfoot, not stained by the footprints of other people. Somewhere far away, perhaps in the depths of the forest, wild animals roamed silently, but here, at the edge of the forest, peace and tranquility reigned. However, at the same time, a vague feeling of anxiety began to grow in Emma's soul. At first, she herself didn't notice how often she began to get stuck on her phone in the evenings, looking through social networks, old photos, and correspondence. She shared less and less with Noah what was bothering her inside. Sometimes, when he, pleased, talked about his plans to train tourist groups or proposals for cooperation with a nature reserve, she would just nod, pretending to listen. In fact, Emma had thoughts of a completely different kind flashing through her head. "How was your day?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fireplace, hugging each other and warming their hands on mugs of cocoa. Harper was dozing sweetly at their feet at that moment. "Okay," she answered briefly and looked into the fire. She wanted to add something more, but the words got stuck in her throat. "Did something happen at the clinic?" "You look kind of sad," Noah clarified softly. "No, I'm just tired. There were a lot of patients today." Emma looked away and took a sip of cocoa, feeling that she was too hot either from the fire or from internal tension. Fatigue was indeed present. In winter, in conditions of ice and snowdrifts, injured patients came to the clinic more often falls, dislocations, sprains. Emma helped as best she could, sometimes staying late after her shift. But there was more to it than that. She was visited by disturbing thoughts about her own past, about whether she was finally ready to ever become a mother again, whether it was too late, and in general, what would be her future fate with Noah. It seemed that everything was going perfectly, but on quiet evenings by the fireplace, she felt that emptiness suddenly settled inside her soul. Instead of sharing these experiences with Noah, she increasingly retreated into herself. "I was sitting on my phone, rereading old messages from a friend in the USA, looking at photographs from the time when I was pregnant. If the child had survived, he would have turned 3 now," she thought, and bitterly pressed her lips together. But Noah, although he noticed the changes, did not immediately understand their depth. He saw that Emma became silent more often, saying, "I'm just tired," and decided that this was really physical and emotional stress, and not painful returns to the past. He tried to take care of her. He brought her hot tea and unobtrusively offered to take a walk. And Emma gratefully accepted this, trying to look more cheerful than she actually felt. At the same time, winter in those parts was fabulous in its own way. Snow was falling softly outside the windows, and the fire in the fireplace gave the house that very feeling of comfort that they were so striving for. The whole December flew by in preparation for Christmas. Even though they were Americans, it was also customary to celebrate Christmas in Canada. Decorations and garlands were placed on the streets of the town. Their new house already had the right to be called a home. Inside there was a live spruce tree, which Noah had cut down in a neighboring area of the forest with the official permission of the forestry department. There were few toys, but Emma happily placed pine cones and wooden figures on the branches, and Harper hovered nearby, trying to steal something to play with. "Do you want us to go to a neighboring town tomorrow for a fair?" Noah suggested one day, looking at the schedule of local events. "They say there's a good holiday market there. You'll be able to buy something to decorate your home." "I'm not sure I can," Emma replied. "We are in a rush situation at our clinic, and I was offered to replace one employee who had a fever. I thought I would agree. We still need money, and I don't want them to be left without help." "I understand," he nodded, trying not to show disappointment. At work, Emma gave her all, and the more she put in effort in the clinic, the more internal fatigue overwhelmed her in her free time. Sometimes, when she had a rare day off, she would simply lie by the fireplace, burying her face in a soft pillow, and Harper would climb in and settle down next to her. Noah sat next to her, stroking her shoulders, but to the question, "How are you?" she most often answered, "It's okay, I just need to get some sleep." The snow continued to fall, covering everything around. The house stood as if in a white cocoon, silence only occasionally interrupted by the clicking of wood in the fireplace. One day, when Noah returned from a short foray into the forest, he found Emma sitting on the porch in a warm jacket, looking into space. Harper snored at her feet. How long have you been here? Aren't you cold? He asked, sitting down next to her and brushing snow from his hair. No, I just went out to get some fresh air, she replied. There was a quiet sadness in the voice. Will you tell me what's bothering you? I see that something is wrong, Noah said quietly, carefully covering her hand with his. She was silent for a few seconds, then stood up, stepping over Harper. I really have nothing to say. Everything is fine. Just tired. He sighed and did not insist. He loved and respected her personal space, but deep down he felt that something was going on. Maybe she is afraid of new losses. Maybe she has internal questions for him that she doesn't dare talk about. Still, Noah believed that Emma would open up when she was ready. Just don't push, he thought. As time passed, the snow cover became thicker. Sometimes they would take Harper together and walk along the forest paths, trying not to stray too far from home because the weather could change dramatically. The dog frolicked, trying to catch snowflakes in his mouth, and Emma sometimes even laughed while watching him. But as soon as they returned to the fireplace, a shadow came over her eyes again. What's the matter with you? Noah asked mentally, hugging her to him. At one of these parties before Christmas, he finally asked a direct question. Listen, maybe we should talk. If you have doubts about our life, if something is wrong, I want to help. She carefully removed the hand he had placed on her shoulder and shook her head. No, everything is fine, really. Never mind. I just need to be quiet sometimes. We dreamed of peace here, and now we have more than enough of it. But this silence is somehow different. She is not joyful, but viscous. Noah expressed for the first time what he had felt for a long time. I'm afraid that you're withdrawing into yourself and not letting me in. We all withdraw into ourselves sometimes, she answered dryly. Don't make a drama out of this. Noah shook his head silently. He didn't want to fight, so he let the situation go, even though he felt the bitter taste of the breakup between them. Harper, as if sensing the tension, jumped up from the mat and nuzzled Emma's hand, looking at her with big, devoted eyes. She smiled at the dog and patted his ear. It's okay, baby, it's okay. Is that all? At this moment, Emma herself was not sure. A gnawing feeling of boredom and devastation, despite outward well-being, made itself felt more and more. She understood that she was closing herself off, and looked guiltily at Noah when he tried to get closer to her. But what can I say? Revisiting painful memories of a lost child. Admit that she is afraid of even a hint of another pregnancy out of fear of a possible tragedy, or that she works hard at work just to avoid thinking about the future. It seemed to her that it was easier to swallow everything in herself and hope that it would resolve itself. And yet life went on as usual. Christmas was approaching. Noah, seeing that Emma was not in the mood, decided not to pressure her with any grandiose plans. Perhaps a quiet family evening is the best solution, he thought. Somehow I decorated the house with a garland and placed small candles on the mantelpiece. Emma brought pine cones and hung them on the Christmas tree along with the toys. Harper had already chewed on one of the paper snowman figures, so they had to hang the others as high as possible. At the same time, the small town in which they lived sparkled with lights. Garlands were lit on the windows of houses everywhere. There was an improvised Christmas tree hung with colorful ribbons at Rose's store, and in the By the Stream cafe you could taste spicy hot wine and fresh Christmas pastries. Sometimes Noah suggested that Emma go there, but she shook her head hesitantly. I don't want to seem like a gloomy holiday guest. Yes, and I'm tired. Instead, they stayed at home, drank cocoa or herbal tea, and sat by the fireplace. It would seem like an ideal picture. Snow outside the window, a warm fireplace, a beloved dog, a loved one nearby. But the words that the external idol does not always coincide with the internal were confirmed by this winter. Every day Emma became more withdrawn. On Christmas Eve, there was a particularly heavy snowfall. In the morning, the wind howled so much that the windows seemed shrouded in white fog. Noah got up early to clear the porch. Harper, seeing his master getting dressed, jumped up happily and wagged his tail, but Noah said, "Today I'm on my own. There is a strong wind here. You better stay warm for now. You'll keep an eye on Emma." The dog probably didn't understand and sat down by the door slightly offended, watching Noah go out into the snowstorm. Emma watched all this while sitting on the bed in the bedroom. She wrapped her arms around herself chillily. There was a pounding in my head. I have to tell him something, tell him. But how? She felt that her apathy, her silent melancholy, could hurt Noah, who was trying for the sake of their common future. Half an hour later, she pulled herself together, threw on a sweater, and went out to him to clean the path together. Noah, seeing her, was about to say something like, "Why are you here? I can handle it myself." But Emma gently stopped him. "Give me a shovel. I'm not Crystal, I can handle it. Besides, it's faster together." They worked side by side in silence, raking away the dense snowdrifts. The snow was falling in flakes, and the cold wind sometimes forced us to close our eyes and turn our faces away. When the path was clear, Noah and Emma stopped to catch their breath. Looking at the snow-white silence around, she said quietly, "I think I should apologize." "For what?" he asked softly, wiping snow from his mittens. "Because for several weeks now I've seemed to have retreated inside myself. For not talking about my thoughts, but simply saying, 'I'm tired.' She bit her lip for a moment, not knowing how to continue. "It hurts me to remember the past. And when I look at Harper, I rejoice, and then I immediately remember that I already lost a little life once, and I begin to fear that I will again lose what I love." Noah took her hand in his. "I'm sorry I didn't immediately realize how deep it goes. I didn't want to rush you, but I felt like you weren't okay. I love you, Em, and I don't want our family to be a source of fear. After all, we moved here to move on with our lives, not to run away from memories." "I know." Tears appeared in Emma's eyes, and then the frost burned them, and she blinked quickly, brushing away the droplets. "Sorry, I wanted to be strong and cheerful, but sometimes it seems to me that I am weak. I'm getting used to the fact that there are two of us, plus Harper, and one day it pops into my head. What if I'm not capable of becoming a mother again? And instead of talking to you, I withdraw into myself, look at old photos, and this only makes things worse." He reached out and hugged her to him, despite the blizzard and snow that immediately clung to their shoulders. They stood in the middle of a white, silent courtyard, like two dark silhouettes embracing in a whirlwind of snowflakes. "I won't put pressure and say, 'Let's have kids right now,'" Noah said, carefully brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "If the day comes when we both want it and are ready, then everything will happen by itself. For now, let's just be together. I cherish every moment we spend together, even if it is tinged with pain. I'm ready to share it with you." Emma buried her face in his jacket. It became easier to breathe, as if the snow clouds in her head also began to dissipate. They stood there for a few minutes, feeling each other's warmth, then, freezing, they went into the house. "You know," she said, undressing in the hallway, "I've long wanted to tell you. You, too, can tell me about your firefighter past. I know that you are tormented by memories of your friend." "They torture me," he admitted quietly. "But I also decided that I would just move on. But in fact, I continue to blame myself for not saving him. It turns out that we are both trying to run away from old pain." They took each other's hands and silently agreed. Perhaps they should turn to specialists, or at least talk to each other frankly. After all, family life is not only about sharing joys, but also bearing hardships together. Inside, a joyfully jumping Harper was already waiting for them, who, upon seeing the owners, began jumping and wagging his tail, demanding attention. Noah and Emma laughed. Such a reception certainly did not leave room for melancholy. "Sorry, my friend," Emma turned to him. "We didn't let you out to play in the snow this morning." Harper responded with a resounding woof and wagged his tail so hard that he almost knocked over his bowl. Noah took off his hat and scratched the dog behind the ear. "Let's warm up with tea first, and then we'll all go for a walk together." Only for a short time, so as not to freeze your tails. They brought mugs from the kitchen and sat down by the fireplace. Outside, the snowstorm continued to howl, but inside it was quiet and warm. Emma handed Noah a mug, sat down next to him, and laid her head on his shoulder. He kissed the top of her head. Understanding reigned between them. Not everything is smooth, not everything is easy, but they decided to open their wounds to each other. And even though there is a long road of healing ahead, it is important that they are ready to walk along it together. When the Christmas holidays ended, life returned to its usual course. The snow continued to fall, turning the small town into a cozy winter wonderland. Neighbors wished each other a happy New Year and Merry Christmas, exchanged small gifts, and invited each other to dinner. However, soon the holiday bustle ended and cold, calm everyday life began, filled with work and household chores. Emma lingered more and more often at the clinic. Initially, it seemed completely natural. She was a nurse, and in the winter, there are always a lot of injuries and colds in the mountains. In addition, several of her colleagues fell ill with the flu, and Emma, being a compassionate and hardworking person, agreed to cover shifts, helping the others cope with the workload. At first, Noah didn't see any problem with this. Moreover, he was even proud of how dedicated she was to her profession. He recalled how in his youth he worked as a fireman and did not return home for days. Then he also considered his profession not just a job, but a calling. If it's important for Emma to be at the clinic, I should support her, Noah thought. He took care of the housework without complaint, walked with Harper, and cooked dinners. Sometimes in the evenings, while waiting for his wife, he even experimented in the kitchen, trying out new recipes to please her after a hard day. But gradually the situation began to change. Now Emma's work schedule looked something like this. She spent the morning at home, went to work in the afternoon, and returned closer to midnight. Occasionally, she wrote short messages to Noah. "I'll be late, don't wait up," or "Urgent patient, I'll come later." Sometimes very rarely she called, and then her voice sounded tired but soft. "Sorry, Noah, there's a whole influx of patients here. The flu attacked the town again. Have you had dinner?" "Yes, of course, I cooked spaghetti, left a portion in the refrigerator," he answered calmly, trying to sound caring and not alarmed. "Thank you, darling. Don't wait for me. Go to bed." The conversations ended on that familiar note, and Noah calmly hung up. But after this call, anxiety gradually accumulated inside him. And then one evening, when it was already past midnight, he sat in the living room by the fireplace, stroking the dozing Harper. There was silence in the house, only the crackling of the firewood and the muffled ticking of the clock. The snow stopped falling outside the window, and now through the window clear stars were visible above the frost-covered fir trees. Harper suddenly raised his head and whined softly, looking at the front door. "Do you think she will come soon?" Noah asked the dog, stroking his head. The dog continued to look at the door, as if expecting it to open at any moment. But this did not happen. For the first time in a long time, Noah allowed himself to doubt that he understood what was happening. Of course, he knew that being a nurse is difficult and stressful work, especially in winter. But something was wrong, something inexplicable, which he could not yet give an exact definition. Another hour passed before the door quietly opened and Emma walked in, looking exhausted and pretty cold. "Why aren't you sleeping?" she asked, taking off her jacket and gloves, trying not to look him in the eye. "I was waiting for you," Noah answered in an even voice. "Dinner is in the refrigerator. Warm up?" "No, I'm not hungry," she softly refused, walking past and heading to the bedroom. Noah frowned when he noticed that she was avoiding his eyes. Maybe we should talk? You look very tired lately. You constantly take other people's shifts." She paused for a second, then smiled slightly and shook her head. "This is temporary. It's just the winter season. Just a couple more weeks, and it will get easier." He wanted to object, but something held him back. He simply nodded and allowed her to move on. She's probably right, he convinced himself, trying to push away the heavy thoughts. It's probably just work pressure. But soon doubts overtook him again. Over the following days, he began to notice more and more little things that gradually formed an alarming picture. One evening, while Emma was on shift, he walked into the bedroom to find his phone charger. She always kept her charger on her bedside table. Noah did not find the necessary wire and, irritated, was about to leave the room when his gaze fell on a small diary lying next to the pillow. He had never noticed Emma writing anything in her diary before. He paused for a second, fighting the urge to open it and find out what was bothering his wife so much. But an inner voice told him that this would be wrong, and he looked away. However, curiosity and anxiety had already settled deep inside him. He returned to the living room and sat down on the sofa, looking out the window at the softly falling snow. Harper, as if sensing his owner's mood, lay down next to him and put his muzzle on his lap. "Something is happening, Harp," Noah said quietly, "and I don't understand what exactly." The dog just sighed and closed his eyes. In the days that followed, Noah tried not to bring up the topic again. He still convinced himself that Emma was just tired and really needed time. He continued to cook dinners, wait patiently for her to get home from work, and walk the dog. But one evening his patience began to run out. That day Emma was late again, and this time she didn't even call to warn. The clock showed almost midnight, and Noah nervously glanced at the phone screen, unable to find a place to rest. Finally, the door opened and Emma walked in, looking even more depressed and stressed than before. Noah began, choosing his words carefully. "Listen, I understand that you have a lot of work, but can't you just call and say that you're late?" She shuddered at his words and turned to him. "Sorry, I just forgot." "Forgot?" He raised his eyebrows in surprise. This didn't happen before. "Well, that means it happens now," she suddenly answered sharply. Her voice sounded louder than usual, and both were surprised by this. "Emma." Noah tried to move closer to her, but she stepped back. "I'm tired, Noah. I'm just tired. We've already discussed this." "No, we didn't discuss it," he said firmly. "You just repeat that you're tired and don't say anything else. I see that something is happening to you, but you won't let me in. Why?" Emma fell silent, looking at the floor, as if weighing every word, and then said quietly, "Because it has nothing to do with you. It's just mine." She quickly walked past, disappearing into the bedroom, leaving him standing in the hallway. Everything inside him clenched with anxiety and disappointment. He heard the bedroom door close and the lock click. This was the first time in all their time together that Emma had deliberately closed herself off from him. Noah slowly sank down onto the sofa, staring into space. Harper appeared nearby again, as if trying to console his owner. "What should we do, buddy?" Noah asked in a whisper, stroking the dog. "What is happening to her?" Harper couldn't answer, but his warm presence became Noah's only support during this difficult evening. He sat and looked at the closed bedroom door, feeling that for the first time in a long time their house became colder and emptier. The first days of spring in British Columbia brought with them a sense of awakening. The snow began to melt from the roofs of the houses, water dripped loudly, and in the morning the air smelled of melted ice and wet earth. Despite this natural cheerfulness, the atmosphere in Noah and Emma's home remained tense. After the last conversation, Emma became a little more attentive, began to call more often and warn if she was late, but the invisible wall that had grown between the spouses did not disappear. One day, returning home after a walk with Harper, Noah noticed an unfamiliar car parked in their driveway. The small red SUV looked unusual for their quiet street. He carefully examined the car and went inside the house. Emma sat in the living room, sorting through documents and medical references. Her face expressed fatigue, but her mood seemed better than usual. She smiled faintly when she saw Noah. "Hello, how was your walk? Is Harper happy?" "Yeah, he likes dirt," he grinned, taking off his jacket. "Do we have a guest?" She hesitated for a second, then quickly said, "Oh, this is Sean, my new colleague, paramedic. He drove me home because my car was left near the clinic. The starter broke today or something like that." There was a warm note in her voice, and Noah caught it instantly. He didn't show it, he just smiled and nodded. I could have picked you up myself. Why didn't I call? I didn't want to bother you. Sean still lives nearby. It was on his way, she hastened to explain. Noah looked at his wife carefully, feeling an unpleasant chill in his chest. The name Sean sounded over and over in his head, causing a strange, hitherto unfamiliar anxiety. He asked carefully, "What kind of guy? I haven't heard his name before." "Sean recently moved to live with us from Vancouver," Emma began calmly, folding the papers into a neat pile. "He is a paramedic with extensive experience and helps in emergencies. By the way, very professional. He and I have already managed to save a couple of tourists who had a bad skiing accident." She spoke about this with such light enthusiasm that Noah had not heard her voice for a long time, and for some reason, this worried him even more. "It's good that you have a reliable colleague," Noah said as neutrally as possible, sitting down opposite her. Emma did not seem to notice his tension and continued a little more animatedly. "Yes, he's a good guy. Attentive, always ready to help. Even today, he noticed that I was upset about the car and offered me a ride without waiting for me to ask him." Noah looked at her carefully, studying every word and intonation. He suddenly felt a painful prick inside the same prick that someone else had felt long ago because of him. Then Emma was just as delighted and inspired. Then it was he who seemed to her like that reliable, professional guy, ready to help at any moment. Now he heard the same thing, but his place in these words was taken by some unknown Sean. "I'm glad he's so attentive," he said quietly, looking somewhere to the side. "Yes, this is important," Emma answered a little absent-mindedly, returning to the papers. "We worked well together, and it even became easier for me to endure long shifts." She fell silent, apparently noticing his tension. After a few seconds, she raised her head and asked softly, "Noah, is something wrong?" "No, it's okay," he answered quickly, not wanting to admit his thoughts. "Just a little tired from the walk." He stood up abruptly and went to the kitchen, trying not to show his condition. Harper trotted after him, sensing his owner's mood. In the kitchen, Noah poured himself a glass of water and stood thoughtfully by the window, looking at the slowly falling dusk. "This is stupid," he convinced himself. "Emma just got a good colleague. This is completely normal." But the inner voice continued to persistently repeat, "Why does she talk about him like that? Why so warm and enthusiastic?" After a while, Emma entered the kitchen and carefully hugged him from behind. "I'm sorry if I offended you in any way. It's just that I haven't talked about work for a long time, but then I felt that I could be useful again." He sighed and turned around, hugging her back. "No, Em, it's okay. I'm just not used to you talking about someone so warmly. Accept me." She looked into his eyes with slight surprise, then smiled and pressed closer. "But you always come first. Sean is just a colleague, nothing more." He wanted to believe these words sincerely and desperately. He wanted to believe that all these were just stupid suspicions born from his own fears and complexes. But somewhere deep inside, something new and painful has already arisen, like a tiny splinter that you won't immediately feel, but which will begin to hurt more and more if it is not removed in time. The next few days passed quietly. Emma didn't mention Sean again, as if sensing that the topic might cause tension. Noah didn't ask either, although every time she lingered, the image of this unfamiliar paramedic with whom his wife worked side by side every day involuntarily surfaced in his mind. But a few evenings later, when they were again sitting together in front of the fireplace, Emma brought up the topic again. She mindlessly stroked Harper and then suddenly said thoughtfully, "Today Sean told such a touching story. He has a daughter, a little girl, who lives with his ex-wife in Vancouver. He misses her terribly and goes there every week to spend the weekend with her. Can you imagine how much he spends on travel just to see his daughter?" Noah felt that unpleasant tingling sensation in his chest again. He answered calmly, but with slight tension, "It sounds like you talk to him a lot." "Well, we work together, it's inevitable," Emma shrugged, not paying much attention to his intonation. "His story just grabbed me. He's not a bad person." Noah sighed and said nothing in response. He understood that if he started to find out something now, he risked creating a problem out of nothing. And yet he was haunted by this, not a bad person. He remembered how once upon a time, at the beginning of their relationship, Emma had called him exactly such a person. For the first time, he thought seriously, what if his quiet, kind Emma began to look at someone else the way she once looked at him? At night, lying in bed next to his sleeping wife, Noah could not close his eyes. He looked at the ceiling, feeling unpleasant thoughts arising inside. He convinced himself that this was nonsense, that he was just jealous for no reason. But a dark, annoying thought had already settled inside, and it was not so easy to get rid of it. He sighed quietly and closed his eyes, trying to suppress his anxiety and fall asleep. But sleep still did not come. For several weeks in a row, Harper behaved unusually. Usually cheerful and playful, the dog became stubborn and irritable, especially on walks. As soon as Noah took her outside, the retriever immediately began to pull the leash in the same direction, not paying attention to the owner's orders. One morning, when the sun was just rising above the horizon and the air was cool and fresh, Harper pulled him along again towards the park, stubbornly moving her paws and whining softly. "Harper, what's wrong with you?" Noah muttered, feeling the leash tighten in his hand. He decided that the dog liked something in the park, perhaps rabbits or squirrels, and did not resist. Noah's heart beat evenly. He enjoyed the coolness of the morning, walked behind the dog, feeling his steps quietly crunch on the fresh gravel of the path. After walking a few hundred meters, Harper turned sharply onto a narrow alley almost hidden between tall bushes. He had never paid attention to her before. It seemed that this place was created specifically for those who want to hide from prying eyes. "Where are you going?" he asked in surprise, quickening his pace behind the retriever. The dog pulled him harder and harder, as if he realized that his owner had almost given up. Noah slowed down, feeling a strange uneasiness begin to rise within him. It was quiet around, only the branches rustled under the light wind. And suddenly Harper stopped, craned her neck, looking carefully ahead. In the depths of the alley, in a small parking pocket, stood a familiar red pickup truck. Noah's heart sank painfully. He slowly walked closer, feeling his breathing becoming faster and heavier. Harper broke free from her leash and ran straight to the car, barking softly as if trying to attract the attention of those inside. Noah froze, feeling as if his feet were rooted to the ground. He had already seen enough to feel an icy chill running down his spine. Emma and Sean were sitting in the cab of the pickup truck. They didn't notice the dog. They didn't notice anyone at all. Their heads were slightly tilted towards each other. They kissed calmly, quietly, and without passion, as people who are accustomed to this gesture do. Noah felt the ground disappear from under his feet. He instinctively stepped back, tripped over a branch, and almost fell. At the same moment, Emma looked up and met Noah's gaze. Her face turned pale. She abruptly pulled away from Sean, opened the door, and quickly got out of the car. "Noah!" Her voice sounded scared and confused. He looked at her silently. The words stuck in my throat. All he could feel now was pain and shock, mixed with acute, unbearable bitterness. Sean also got out of the car, avoiding looking into Noah's eyes, and said quietly, as if making excuses, "Look, we didn't want to." Noah didn't let him finish. "Shut up." His voice was cold and harsh, so much so that even Harper raised her head warily. Sean stopped short and looked away, unable to find what to answer. Emma stepped closer, extending her arms towards Noah, but he instinctively stepped back. "I can explain everything." She began, her voice trembling, but he shook his head. "Explain? What exactly do you want to explain? What was that? Why are you here?" His voice sounded even, but a real storm was raging inside. He felt humiliated, deceived, betrayed all at the same time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and tears rolled down her cheeks. It's not what you think." Noah chuckled dryly. "What should I think, Emma? That my wife kisses her co-worker in the park in the morning just out of friendship." She looked away, no longer trying to say anything. Noah looked at Sean, who was nervously shifting from foot to foot, clearly feeling out of place. "Go away," Noah said sharply. "Get out of here now." Sean silently returned to the car, quickly started the engine, and drove off, leaving them alone. Harper quietly walked to Noah's feet, feeling his pain and confusion. They stood silently. Emma didn't try to make excuses anymore. She just repeated quietly and meaninglessly, "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "How long has this been going on?" he finally asked, almost in a whisper. "Not for long," she answered, still not looking up. "It's just, I was lost, and he was nearby." "Lost?" Noah asked bitterly. "Why didn't you tell me about this? Why did you prefer the consolation of some Sean?" She shook her head and cried quietly, covering her face with her hands. "I tried to tell you, Noah, but every time I approached you, I was afraid of hurting you with my truth. I know what I did was terrible. I have no excuse." He sighed, feeling his heart being torn apart. "Come home, Emma," he said calmly, trying to hide the trembling in his voice. "We need to talk, but not now. I can't do it now." She nodded, wiping away her tears, and walked away, leaving Noah alone in the middle of the alley. He stood in one place for a long time, feeling the cold penetrate his body, hindering his movements. Harper quietly pressed herself against his legs, making no attempt to leave. "Thank you for bringing me here," he said quietly to the dog. "You are the only one who did not hide the truth from me." Finally, he turned slowly and headed home. The hardest part lay ahead: the conversation with Emma, making decisions that seemed impossible just yesterday. This small alley became for him a place where all his illusions about a happy life collapsed. From now on, it will forever remain the place where the truth was found, bitter and painful, but necessary. Noah walked home, lost in his thoughts, and already knew that now his life would never be the same. Noah sat at the kitchen table, clasping his fingers, looking somewhere to the side. Emma, opposite him, hunched over, wrapped her hands around a mug of already cooled tea. They were just silent for a few minutes until she spoke first. "I know you want to ask me why." "No," he answered briefly, without raising his eyes. "I want to ask why." Emma swallowed and said quietly, "I don't know. Believe me, I really don't understand how I got to this point." Noah looked up at her, tired and heavy. "You don't know? Are you kissing another man, and you don't know why?" "I know what that sounds like, Noah. But I didn't plan for this to happen. It's just that at some point I felt that I had lost myself, and he was nearby." "I was nearby, Emma. I was always there." She looked down at the mug. "Yes, you were nearby. But the closer you were, the more empty I felt. I don't blame you. It's my fault, my choice. I was tired, and it made me weak." "So you're tired of me?" he asked quietly and restrainedly. "No, I'm tired of myself," she interrupted sharply. "From my memories, from my fears, from trying to be an ideal wife. And at some point, I just stopped fighting." "Does fighting now mean being faithful?" His voice sounded sharp. Emma shook her head, sighing heavily. "Everything is always clear to you, Noah. Good or bad, right or wrong. But I'm lost. I was looking for a way out, without understanding why, and I ended up where I ended up." Noah was silent for a few seconds, then asked bitterly, "Do you love him?" "No," she said firmly and confidently, "and I don't like myself with him either. But I admit, at some point I felt better. This is all." "So it was easier for you with him than with me?" Emma looked up at him sad, without hope. "It was easier with him because I didn't have to prove anything. And with you, I tried to be better than I really could be." "I never asked you to be better." His voice trembled. "I know," she answered wearily. "I asked myself this, and I couldn't handle it myself." He took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eyes. "Do you want me to forgive you?" Emma paused and said quietly, "No, Noah, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth." The kitchen was illuminated only by the dim light from the lamp above the table. Outside the window, dawn was breaking slowly and wearily, painting the room in shades of gray. Noah and Emma were still sitting opposite each other, an invisible wall between them, although the conversation had already lasted several hours. Harper lay at Noah's feet, sometimes whining quietly, as if feeling her owner's pain and confusion. Noah was the first to break the long silence. When exactly did you realize that you didn't love me anymore? Emma slowly looked up at him. There was sadness in her gaze, but there was no lie. Don't know. It didn't happen right away. I just gradually began to understand that there was emptiness between us. It didn't happen suddenly, Noah. I just stopped feeling. Have you stopped feeling for me? No, I stopped feeling at all. But this especially affected us. He looked at her for a long time, trying to find in her eyes at least a shadow of the woman who once loved him. And Sean, does he mean something to you? Emma sighed quietly and shook her head. No, it was just an attempt to feel something. It was a mistake. I understand myself. You say it was a mistake, but you continued to make it anyway, Noah said, trying to keep his voice calm. Why? She looked away, clutching a mug of iced tea. Because it was a different reality. There was no need to pretend to be happy. It was easy. Just easy. Was it difficult for me? Emma looked up at him. There was sadness and regret in them, but not love. Yes, it was hard with you, because I saw how you try, how you love me, and I understood that I could no longer answer you in kind. I was afraid to confess to you. Noah felt his heart clench with pain, but he continued calmly. So, all this time you were with me only because you were afraid of hurting me. She nodded quietly. Probably yes, I was afraid of hurting you. And the more she was afraid, the more she moved away. Harper whined harder, nuzzling Noah's legs. He stroked her head, as if trying to find support. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why did you let me believe that everything was fine with us? Emma looked at him with quiet sadness. Because I wanted to believe it myself. I thought it was temporary. I thought that if I remained silent, everything would go away by itself. But it only got worse. Noah looked down at his hands, sighing heavily. Do you know what hurts the most? Until the last moment, I believed that we could fix everything. I truly believed in us. She answered quietly. I know. This is what hurt me. Your faith and hope, which I could no longer justify. Have you ever thought about leaving me? Emma paused and answered without looking up. Yes, I've thought about this many times. But every time I thought about you and was afraid of your reaction, it seemed to me that this way I would ruin your life completely. Noah smiled bitterly and said quietly, Didn't you think that this had already ruined my life? She raised her eyes, and for the first time he saw that tears appeared in them. Sorry, Noah. I really didn't want this to happen. But that's exactly what happened, he said calmly. Do you regret marrying me? She shook her head. No, I don't regret it. I was really happy with you for a while. It just went away one day, and I couldn't get it back. Why didn't you tell me about your doubts when they first appeared? Emma was silent for a long time, then answered very quietly. I was afraid to admit it to myself. Admit that you have failed again. So it wasn't just me. No, it was about both of us. We both came into this relationship with pain, and at some point it won. Noah looked out the window. Dawn had already finally come into its own, dispersing the darkness and showing the emptiness of the room. Do you think we could save our marriage? Emma answered honestly and quietly. I don't know, Noah. Perhaps, if I had said earlier. Perhaps. But now I don't believe that we can go back. He looked her straight in the eyes and asked the most difficult question. Do you want to leave? She didn't answer right away. The seconds passed slowly, painfully. Then, finally, her voice quietly cut through the silence. Yes, I think it will be better for both of us. Noah felt the last hope inside him quietly extinguish. You left a long time ago, he said calmly. I just forgot to tell you about it. Emma didn't deny it. She just said quietly, That's probably true. They fell silent again. Harper, still shaking, whined softly. Noah put his hand on her head and said quietly, almost in a whisper, You know, I really loved you. I was ready to go through everything with you. Emma looked at him, and in her eyes he saw no love, only regret and sadness. I know, Noah. That's why it's so hard for me now. Because you deserve someone who will love you just as much. He smiled, bitterly and tiredly. Yes, apparently so. She rose from her chair, looking at him long and quietly, as if trying to remember his face as it was now. Will you ever be able to forgive me? She asked quietly. Noah sighed, looked up at her, and answered without anger, but with a deep feeling of devastation. I don't know, Emma, but even if I can, I will never be able to forget. She nodded silently and walked towards the exit from the kitchen, leaving him alone with his thoughts and pain that could not be expressed in words. This night is over, but ahead of them both was the unknown, frightening and difficult as never before. Noah stood at the door, bag in hand, looking down the hallway as if trying one last time to commit to memory the details of the house he was building for them. Now he seemed alien, cold and empty. Harper sat next to her as if she understood what was happening and whined softly, clinging to her owner's legs. Emma stood nearby, motionless and silent, watching with sadness as he prepared to leave. She didn't say a word when he took the leash and collar, and didn't stop him when he took the dog's bowls and toys. I'll take Harper, Noah said quietly, finally looking up at his wife. Do you mind? Emma shook her head. No, she was always more yours than mine. He didn't answer. There was nothing to add. Noah opened the door and stepped outside. The spring air greeted him with coolness and the smell of melted snow. Harper walked quietly next to her, without looking back. He didn't turn around either. There was nothing to see. The house Noah rented a few miles from town smelled of fresh paint and new furniture. It was small, empty, as if no one had lived there before. The walls were grayish-white. The windows were still without curtains, which made everything seem too bright and uncomfortable. But for Noah now, this was exactly what he needed. The emptiness corresponded to his inner state. On the first evening, he threw the mattress directly on the floor in the bedroom and lay down, looking at the ceiling without turning on the light. The silence was oppressive, making me feel even more alone than before. But Harper lay next to him, clinging to his side, and only her warm breath indicated that he was still alive. Thank you for being there, girl, he whispered, stroking her head. The dog licked his hand as if to console him. A week has passed. The days were similar to each other. He got up, walked with Harper, cooked simple breakfasts and dinners without tasting the food. The work of the survival instructor was temporarily suspended. He could not bring himself to think about anything other than his loss. His phone vibrated several times a day, the screen flashing Emma's name. Sometimes she called, more often she texted. He didn't answer, but he read anyway, and every time her words were about Harper. How is she feeling? Do you mind if I visit her next week? I think I hear her footsteps at night. The last message made him wince. I dream about the dog. I miss her. He looked at the screen for a long time, feeling strangely relieved and at the same time angry. She missed the dog. Not for him. Even in this, she was honest. Noah never responded to any of the messages. Inside himself, he admitted that he was also bored. Not for Emma, for the house that they created together, for warm evenings by the fireplace, for that life that was full of hope and faith in the future. But now all that remains is pain and silence. One evening, sitting on the steps of his empty house and watching Harper run around the yard, Noah heard the phone ring again. He saw a new message from Emma, short and simple. Please just let me know she's okay. I'm not trying to get back what I lost. He looked at Harper, who stopped and looked at him with big eyes, as if understanding his torment. Do you miss her, girl? He asked quietly. Harper cocked her head to the side and barked softly, as if answering him. Noah looked back at the phone with a heavy sigh. He didn't answer. I couldn't. So far the pain was too strong and the wound too fresh. But somewhere deep inside, he knew that the time would come when he would have to look into Emma's eyes again and finally let her go. For now, he simply put the phone down and called Harper back into the house, feeling that she was the only living soul who truly cared about him. The evening was quiet and cool. Dusk slowly fell on the small rental house, filling the rooms with dim light. Noah sat in a chair on the porch, looked at the horizon, behind which the sun was hidden, and felt the heaviness come back to his chest. Harper lay next to him, resting her head on his lap and sighing softly. "You don't think I'm crazy, do you, girl?" he asked quietly, stroking her behind the ear. Harper looked at him with her kind, dark eyes, as if she understood every word. "Do you know why I'm talking to you? Because you're the only one left. The only one who didn't betray. I don't know how to explain this feeling." He sighed and fell silent. Harper quietly licked his hand, and he continued, not afraid of looking stupid. "I thought I knew her better than anyone else in this world. I believed that Emma was the one with whom I would grow old, that we will get through everything together. But it turned out that I didn't know her at all." His voice trembled slightly, and he clenched his fingers into a fist, feeling the heavy emptiness growing inside again. "Why didn't I notice anything earlier, Harper? After all, there were signs." She became more silent. She was hiding in the phone, her eyes looking through me, and I continued to convince myself that it was fatigue, work, stress. Harper whined quietly, as if the words hurt her too. He stroked her again, calming her down. "You know, I don't miss her, Harper. I miss who I was next to her. I miss my faith in happiness. Now it seems to me that all this was a lie, a beautiful fairy tale that I invented for myself." He looked at the dog and smiled sadly. "You're the only one who isn't trying to lie to me. You've always been honest with me, girl. This is probably why it's easier for me to talk to you now than to anyone else." Harper raised her head and put her paw on his knee, as if she wanted to comfort him and show him that she was there. From this simple gesture, Noah felt tears welling up in his eyes. He leaned down and hugged her, pressing his face to the soft fur. "Thank you, Harper. Thank you for staying with me when everyone else leaves. You are the only one who helps me understand that I am still alive." Harper quietly pressed herself against him, comforting him with her warmth. In this quiet evening conversation, he felt relief for the first time in a long time. The pain did not go away, but she was there, a faithful friend who could not betray. And now this was enough to move on with life. The day was the same as the previous ones. Gray sky, cold air, silence, and emptiness. Noah was pouring himself some coffee in the kitchen when he suddenly heard the familiar sound of a car approaching. He froze, looking out the window, feeling his heart skip a beat. Emma's car slowly stopped at the gate. A few seconds passed before the door opened, and she stepped outside. Noah watched without moving, his heart beating painfully and sharply again. Harper, sensing something, immediately jumped up and headed towards the door, wagging her tail excitedly and whining softly. Noah watched silently as the dog ran to meet the one who had once been its beloved owner. He opened the door and remained standing in the doorway, looking at Emma without emotion. She stopped on the path, smiling hesitantly, her face expressing embarrassment and awkwardness. "Hello, Noah. I know I should have warned you, but I really missed Harper." "She missed you too," he answered calmly, watching the dog, which had almost reached her. Harper stopped a few steps away from Emma, suddenly freezing as if she sensed something. The dog, a second ago cheerful and happy, suddenly stopped wagging its tail. Her ears stood up, the fur on her back rose, and a quiet, low growl escaped from her chest. Emma froze, looking at the dog in shock. "Harper, it's me," she said quietly, trying to smile and extending her hand. But the retriever did not move. She didn't rush forward, didn't lick her mistress's hand, didn't run up to hug her like before. She just stood and looked into Emma's eyes, growling quietly and not taking her eyes off her intensely. Noah watched this in silence, feeling how something inside was completely collapsing and at the same time becoming clear. The dog did what he could not do himself. He put an end to it. Emma lowered her hand, her eyes filling with tears. She looked at Noah, trying to find an explanation. "I don't understand." She never. "Animals don't lie, Emma," Noah said quietly. "They always know the truth." She stood silently, looking at Harper, who still did not take her gaze off her, occasionally uttering a low, warning growl. Finally, Emma stepped back, realizing that she was no longer welcome here. "Sorry to bother you," she said barely audibly, taking a step back towards the car. "I won't come again." Noah said nothing, only silently watched her get into the car and slowly drive away. When the car disappeared around the bend, Harper relaxed again and walked up to the owner, burying her muzzle in his hand. He knelt down next to the dog and said quietly, "You did great, girl. You did the right thing." At that moment, Noah realized that the pain was gradually giving way to another feeling peace. All uncertainty and doubt is now over. There were no more questions to look for answers to. Harper put a point where he couldn't have put it himself. Several weeks passed before Noah accidentally learned that Emma had left town. He went to a cafe near the clinic in the morning to drink coffee and involuntarily overheard a conversation between two women at the next table. Their voices were quiet, but Emma's name sounded clear and painfully familiar. "She just left at night without telling anyone," one of them said, adjusting her scarf. "Even at the clinic, no one knew in advance. I left a note, and that's it. It must have been hard for her to stay here after what happened," the second one answered thoughtfully. Noah didn't listen to the end. He went outside, holding a hot glass of coffee in his hand, but not feeling its warmth. Something trembled inside again, although he thought that he was no longer able to feel anything. He was not surprised. Rather, he felt a strange emptiness that could not be filled with anything. Harper sat outside the cafe, waiting patiently for him, and looked questioningly into his eyes. He stroked her and said quietly, "Let's go, girl. There's nothing left for us to do here." They walked slowly along the already familiar path in the park. Noah didn't understand why his feet had brought him here again. Perhaps it was his subconscious, trying to put one more, final point. He stopped near the bench, looking at the same hidden alley where his whole world had once collapsed. The bench was empty, slightly damp from the morning rain. On its wooden surface lay a single yellow leaf, like a symbol of the final farewell. Noah stood and looked at this place for a long time, feeling nothing but deep, quiet regret. It no longer caused pain, but remained with him like an old scar, a reminder of what had been and what would never be. "That's it now, Harper," he calmly told the dog, gently stroking its head. "She left completely. It's time for us to go too." Harper took a short breath and stood up, following closely behind him. Noah turned around and headed away from the alley, feeling how every step took him away from the past and brought him closer to something new, unknown, and still unclear. When they were almost out of the park, Noah looked back briefly. Two footprints were clearly imprinted on the wet ground, his own and Harper's small, neat footprint next to him. These footprints were the only ones left here today. He looked at them for a few more seconds, then raised his head and walked forward, without looking back. He left behind what had once been his life and moved on with a faithful friend who never left him. The footprints on the wet ground will gradually disappear, but the memory of who left them nearby will remain with him forever. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.